Hello adventurers, players and DMs alike, I am D&Delver, and today we're going to be talking about the key rule changes in the 2024 Player's Handbook. If you're someone who's maybe considering changing or wants to simply find out more about the new version of the Player's Handbook, this video should be perfect for you. We're going to start with very simple changes and gradually build up to ones where it's an entire paragraph or a rule that has been reworded or changed. So without further ado, let's get going. The first rule change we're going to talk about is more of an honorable mention, really. It's something everyone was already using at their tables, and that is using a bonus action to drink a health potion. Now it is an official rule in the 2024 Player's Handbook, but realistically it was a house rule at almost every table, so it's not going to change much. Number 2 on our list of changes will be the exhaustion rules. The old exhaustion rules were quite harsh and a little bit difficult to memorize, with every level giving you a different penalty. The new exhaustion rules simplified that process. They try to keep it quite punishing, but make it a lot easier to memorize and use on all levels of play. So the new exhaustion rules are as follows. There is still 6 levels to them, but every level now has the same stacking effect. You get a penalty to all of your D20 tests equals to twice the exhaustion level, and you get a penalty to your movement equal to 5 times your exhaustion level, which makes it nice and easy during combat on a grid, because that means that every exhaustion level reduces your movement by 1 square. The next rule change that I'd like to mention is the spellcasting rule. In the 2014 Player's Handbook, there was that weird finicky rule where if you used a leveled spell, you couldn't use anything other than a cantrip magically for the rest of your turn, so no actions or reactions that involve spells. Now that has been changed. The bias against bonus action spells has been removed. So the new spellcasting rule is simply that you can only cast 1 spell using a spell slot per turn. This, as I said, removes that bias against bonus action leveled spells and incentivizes you to think more out of the box about different character or class features or feats that can grant you free castings of a spell, or utilizing spell scrolls more, because now if you use one of those, you're still free to cast another spell on your turn without restrictions like in the 2014 Player's Handbook. So in general, in my book, that is a very positive change that makes a lot more room for different fun play styles and tricks up your sleeve. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the change in the surprise and hiding rules. And because they interact with each other, we will group them together for this one. So starting with surprise. Old surprise essentially was a condition for someone who has been surprised that caused them to essentially miss a turn. Skip their action, bonus action, reaction, movement, everything. Now the surprise has been simplified to be less punishing but still effective. Now it simply gives you disadvantage on your initiative roll, which means that anyone who's surprised is far more likely to be below the ambushing party in the initiative order. Nice and simple, easy to remember. Then onto the hiding rules. The 2014 hiding rule was that you roll for stealth and then you'd either use anyone's passive perception to see if they notice you, or if they're actively looking, they can roll for perception and they have to beat that stealth check. In the 2024 book, it has been defined a little bit more. You still roll for your stealth check when you want to hide, but you now have to beat a DC of 15 to successfully hide. And that gives you the invisible condition, which means all of its perks of disadvantage on attacks against you, advantage on your attacks, and advantage on your initiative. After that, to detect you, the enemies have to either be able to see you, or you have to do one of the things that breaks the invisible condition, as stated in both the description of the invisible condition and in the hiding rules. That means that for an enemy to actively find you, they'd have to either walk over to where they think you are, if they've somehow heard you or saw you before going to wherever you started hiding, or they'd have to use their action on their turn to search for you, and that's when they'd make the perception check to try to beat your initial stealth check that you've rolled. Apart from that, it means that as long as you're hidden, if you're trying to ambush someone, for example, when you're hidden, you get advantage on initiative, and because of the surprise rules, they now get disadvantage when you surprise them, which makes it twice as likely for you to be higher than them on the initiative tracker. Now, the next thing is a brand new rule, as far as I'm aware, and it is the influence action description. So previously in 2014, the player's handbook told you that you can influence creatures in social interactions with things like persuasion or deception checks, but it didn't really give you any specific rules for that, other than the DM will decide when you roll, and you roll a number, and they decide whether you succeed or not. Now we have more defined rules that will massively help new DMs with running those encounters. So the new influence rule is as follows. When you try to influence a creature to take a specific course of action, the DM will decide whether the creature is willing, unwilling, or hesitant about that action. If they are unwilling, the check automatically fails, so you don't actually roll, they just aren't willing to even consider what you're saying. If they're willing, it's the opposite. They are happy with what you're offering, you don't have to roll, you simply succeed. If they're hesitant, that's the part that we're interested in. So if a creature is hesitant, that's when you will be called to roll for your persuasion, deception, intimidation checks. And then the DM will decide whether the creature is hostile, neutral, or friendly towards you. If they're hostile, you will be rolling this check at a disadvantage because the creature is far less likely to trust you or listen to you. If they're neutral, you just do a straight roll, and if they're friendly, they are obviously inclined to trust you and believe you, so you will be rolling at advantage. Overall, this is just a very nice guideline to help new DMs and even older DMs decide exactly how to run those and make it an overall smoother experience. Now, the next one is more of a design philosophy. I'm not going to be speaking about all the details, but it is the way that feats now work in the game. In 2014, feats were an optional rule. You get to choose a feat when you would normally gain an ability score increase. Now feats are a default part of the game, where every time you gain an ability score increase, you can choose either a feat or an ASI. They've also been split into 4 separate categories, which is Origin feats, Fighting Style feats, General feats, and Epic Boon feats. Let's start with Origin feats. You get 10 different options of a feat that comes with your background at level 1. Those feats aren't quite as powerful as most of the general feats, but they will still help you with that unique flavor and playstyle of your character that you want. So everyone gets to pick one at level 1 now, as part of their background. Next, fighting style feats. Now, this is quite simple, it's just that fighting styles have now been turned into feats. And the prerequisite of all of those feats is having a fighting style feature. That just means that when you gain a fighting style, you're technically choosing a feat. And other than that, whenever you get an ability score increase, you could choose a fighting style feat instead of a regular feat. Although I personally wouldn't recommend it, because with general feats, you now always gain a single ability score increase along with them. So they've essentially all been turned into what we consider half feats, giving you +1 to one of your ability scores and then the regular feature of the feat. Now, it is worth noting that it is not any ability score that you can upgrade while choosing a feat. It will be defined by the feat which ability scores you could increase. Those also all have a prerequisite of level 4, which is when you normally gain your first ability score increase. And then the final category is the epic boon feats. Those are the feats that in 2014 you'd only be able to gain past level 20, essentially. Instead of leveling up, you'll be gaining boons. Now they are feats, and they have a prerequisite of level 19 where every character gets one. There is 12 of them, you can pick one of those to gain at level 19, and apart from that you can use them the same way as before, past level 20. If you want to keep playing, DM can reward you with more of those. Now, we always like to save the best for last, so the last thing I'd like to talk about is weapon masteries. It is probably the biggest selling point of the 2024 Player's Handbook, as it massively helps with narrowing the gap between martials and spellcasters, which is known as one of the bigger issues with D&D 5e. So with weapon masteries, there is 8 of them, and how they work is that most martial classes at level 1, maybe 2, they will gain a class feature, which is the weapon mastery, which means that you get to pick weapon masteries for a couple of your character's favorite weapons, meaning that you're especially proficient with them and you get special little things that happen when you attack with those. So because there is only 8 of them, we're going to go through them. The first one on the list is the Cleave mastery, which essentially means that when you hit a creature with an attack, you can also attack another creature within 5 feet of them. That is great for playing into that fantasy of having blows so powerful they go through one enemy and hit another. The second weapon mastery is Graze. This is great for consistency, as that means that when you miss a weapon attack, you still deal damage equivalent to your ability modifier used for that attack. So that means that regardless of whether you hit or not, you will always deal at least a little bit of damage to the creature. The third mastery is Nick. This is great for all of the dual wielders, as this mastery means that when you would normally use your bonus action for an offhand attack, you can now make it as part of the action for the main hand attack, leaving your bonus action free to do whatever you want. Push mastery means that when you hit a creature, you can choose to push them 10 feet away if it is larger or smaller. Sap mastery means that when you hit an enemy, you hinder them slightly, so their next attack roll will be made at a disadvantage. Slow weapon mastery, used largely for the ranged weapons, means that when you hit an enemy, you reduce their speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. Worth noting that this cannot stack. So you can only reduce a creature's speed by 10 feet, you can't hit them enough to reduce it to 0. Topple is the next weapon mastery. As the name would suggest, it allows you to topple a creature, giving them the prone condition if they fail on a constitution saving throw. And the final weapon mastery, which is Vex, means that when you hit a creature with a weapon with that mastery property, your next attack will be made at an advantage until the end of your next turn. So either the next attack on the same turn or your first attack on the next turn will be made at advantage. That will be it for today's video. This is all of the biggest general rule changes in the Player's Handbook 2024. Let me know which one you like the most, if there's any you specifically dislike. If you like the video, like and subscribe, and that will be it. Until next time.